What's happening, guys, and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out the Transformers Studio Series Dark the Moon Core Class Bumblebee. Now, as we very quickly check out the packaging, we get a really cool CG render of Bumblebee in the Battle of Chicago. Hands down, one of the best final battles / action sequences that I think we've ever seen for a live action movie. And I mean, Transformers 3, what a time it was to be alive back when this film hit the big screen. But for the rest of the packaging, we basically do just get some very detailed CG renders. Such an awesome design. I think the best Bayformer design for Bumblebee that we ever got. And here for the back of the box, we do get some product shots. And as you guys may notice, he does look very similar to a previous core class that we checked out. That is because, bang, he is just a recolor / very minor retool of Laserbeak, which we reviewed last year. And I'm going to be honest, guys, I do think this is likely to be the most pointless Studio Series release of all time, because unless Hasbro have plans to maybe bring out Optimus Prime and a few other Autobots and Decepticons in this core class from the Bay movies, then this guy just really does not have a place in the collection at all. And yeah, I mean, unless you're a diehard fan of Transformers Dark the Moon or the Studio Series, then I do think you can give this here an easy pass. Personally, the only reason why I picked this up was because I was a sucker for Transformers Dark the Moon, and this really does throw me back to some of the Cyberverse figures that they brought out for that toy line. But as we check out the details, he does have a brand new head sculpt, that being the battle mask, and the detail on it is pretty cool, although it looks like he's kind of been kissed with Autobot logos, because not only do I have one slap bang and center, but there's also one here for the crest, so I guess they're kind of compensating for the lack of an insignia on the deluxe class version. I'm not even too sure how I'd be able to take that off without damaging the gunmetal. But yeah, it's a pretty cool head sculpt. Because this guy's a recolor, I was kind of hoping that as a gesture of goodwill, maybe they'd pack in the unmasked head sculpt, but it's Hasbro. I guess I was wishing for way too much. And I also wish maybe they could have made use out of these hollow cavities in the shoulders and had given him, instead of this arm cannon, the over-the-shoulder cannons that we saw him use kind of in those first 3 Michael Bay movies. That would have been badass. But besides that, here is Bumblebee, just a yellow recolor of Laserbeak. Definitely not the best core class figure in the world, but most definitely not the worst. Now, in terms of articulation, we do get a pretty cool ball joint at the head. Unfortunately, the chest still loves to kind of auto-transform into vehicle mode. It still does not tab in, which sucks, but we do get some very sturdy ball joints packed into the shoulders, a little bit of elbow articulation, the hips can kick forwards and backwards out to the side, knee articulation, and finally the foot can pivot forwards and backwards, mainly due to transformation. And yes, we get the Stinger Blaster, so you can have Bumblebee decimate the Decepticons. But as I said previously, the only reason I picked this guy up was because he did throw me back to my childhood, 2011. So I thought, just for you guys that may be into Dark the Moon as much as I am, you'd appreciate the comparison between this guy and the Autobot Ark, which hands down has got to be one of the best Transformers playsets that I think Hasbro have ever released. I mean, this thing is well over a decade old now, which makes me feel so old, but still holds up so nicely in terms of a display piece. But anyway, let's cram B into the cockpit and see how that stacks up. Now, I have removed the batteries because the electronic function definitely was a pain in the butt, but as you guys can see, he unfortunately is a little too big. But to be fair, it does kind of look vaguely reminiscent to the dropships that Bumblebee was commanding in Transformers Age of Extinction. So if you do still have this piece knocking around in the collection, then in terms of a display, I don't think it actually looks too bad. But let's stick this guy inside because the Ark could actually transform and see how he stacks up with some of the internal details. And again, yeah, it's slightly too big for the Ark, but I also believe that was an issue that many of us had with the original kind of Cyberverse figures. They were just too big for this playset. If the Ark was to be vaguely in scale with some of these core class figures, then I think it'd have to be kind of a HasLab, because it was an enormous ship in the movie. I mean, come on, it literally took half the moon out when it crash landed, and this is where I really am hoping that maybe they will give us an Optimus Prime, perhaps a Sentinel Prime in this core class scale, because again, it would smack that nostalgia button. And like myself, I'm sure there's many of you guys out there that favour Dark the Moon as much as I do. Now, as we very quickly fly through a few comparisons, here we have Dark the Moon Bumblebee stacked up alongside Laserbeak. And this Laserbeak actually made perfect sense when it was released, because Laserbeak was an incredibly small character. When he kind of disguised himself as Pink Bumblebee, I would say that in terms of a scale difference between this guy and, say, your deluxes, it was pretty smack on to what we saw in the movie. But unfortunately for the actual Bumblebee character, it does just not make sense at all unless Hasbro again do have plans to maybe give us Optimus Prime and basically the entire Autobot cast cast in this core class scale, which at the moment I don't believe is on the cards, which kind of sucks because I would love to see kind of redos of some of those old Commander class figures. But yeah, as you can see, basically just recolors of each other with different head sculpts. Again, it would have been awesome had this guy also came packaged with the unmasked face sculpt, but I imagine that is probably a repack slash retool that they have planned in the future. Next up, here we have B stacked up alongside the Studio Series 86 core class Ironhide. Here he is alongside the Studio Series 86 Wheelie, which is a core release which is in fact in scale with some of those larger deluxe Voyagers and Leaders. And to be fair, I'd love to know down in the comment section below, do you guys think that core class should strictly stick to movie accuracy and only give us characters which should be that small as seen in the movies, or do you think they should maybe begin branching out, much like we're seeing here for this Bumblebee, and giving us larger characters at a slightly smaller and affordable scale point? Again, I wouldn't mind this at all if there are more Bayformer characters planned in the future for this B, because as it stands, he just has no place in my collection at all other than to be basically a huge hit of nostalgia. Which, talking of nostalgia, here we have the Transformers The Last Knight Legion class Crosshairs, and it is kind of crazy to see how far core class has kind of evolved over the past couple of years, because despite me maybe not being the biggest fan of this release, undeniably it is a huge improvement to what basically the old core class figures used to be, that being this Legion class Crosshairs, because unfortunately he lacks elbow joints, he lacks knee articulation, and the transformation is way more basic when in comparison to B. And then finally, here we have Small B alongside Big B. So both of these are Studio Series Dark the Moon releases. If you're wondering where I got this Autobot logo, it is a sticker, so I did plug this on myself. Unfortunately, this did not come with this guy, which is why I'm so bummed out to have two insignias on this little core class and officially none here on the deluxe release. But I thought it'd just kind of be cool to compare both of these guys. I guess the core class isn't too bad for its price point and for its scale. To be fair, it has captured some of the most iconic traits of Dark of the Moon Bumblebee, such as the Chimera chest, the door wings, and some of the details packed into the shins. Now, as we get stuck into the transformation for Bumblebee, the first step is to make sure that the backpack is kind of slid downwards. That will allow for a bit of clearance for us to then take the chest piece and slide this section all the way up. You'll then want to take the head and slide this here into that hollow cavity, and then come down here to the feet, snap those into the shins, and do the same here for this side. You'll then want to take this section, click this piece into the rear of the vehicle, and do the same here for this side, and then take the knee joints and basically just shift these sections upwards and snap all of these tabs and pegs into one another. Then flip him back to the underside. You'll then want to take the shoulders, bring these pieces down, and rotate the wheel outwards, which I thought was a pretty clever piece of engineering for a core class. And then rotate here at the elbow, and then bend outwards, and it will basically just kind of wrap around the head. So make sure that it looks something along the lines of this. Do the exact same here for the opposite side. So bring that shoulder joint down, rotate here at the elbow, just like this, and then for a few finishing touches, make sure that the hood of the vehicle is snapped into place. Take this section and it will snap underneath this rear window, and then basically this little tab is going to smack itself into the back of Bumblebee's hand, and then you'll just lock all of these tiny little tabs into one another, spin around here to the back, and repeat the exact same process. And bang! Here we have Bumblebee fully transformed into his officially licensed 2011 Camaro. And much like the design of the robot mode, my favourite look for the Camaro out of all of the Michael Bay movies. He looked awesome in Transformers 3, and the core class figure does a pretty good job in kind of capturing the actual vehicle as seen in the film. Although, I gotta be honest guys, again, as I mentioned in bot mode, I think it is a massive missed opportunity not to make use out of some of these hollow cutouts that we have up front, because Bumblebee's biggest upgrade from Revenge of the Fallen to Dark of the Moon was that he had a stealth mode. He was able to take out the Decepticons or any of his enemies when in vehicle mode, so you know, to smack on a few cannons here up front, I don't think would have got a miss. But the details for this are surprisingly all pretty on point, and to kind of go back to my opinion on a stealth mode, I guess you can still smack the arm cannon on the roof of the vehicle so that he can take out some of those Decepticons in the highway battle. Now, as we check out a few comparisons in vehicle mode, here we have Bumblebee stacked up alongside Laserbeak, so I don't believe there are any differences in terms of the amount of paint used between these two guys. Of course, it is literally just the difference of the colour of the plastic. So Laserbeak being pink and Bumblebee being yellow. You guys let me know down in the comment section below, out of the two, which is the one you personally prefer. I think in vehicle mode, I've got to give it here to Bumblebee, but in robot mode, hands down, I do think personally Laserbeak looks a little cooler. Here is B alongside that Studio Studio Series 86 core Ironhide, and despite them being very similarly scaled in robot mode, Bumblebee is quite a bit longer when in comparison to this chubby little Ironhide. Here's core class 86 Wheelie, just so you guys can see roughly how these stack up alongside each other. Transformers The Last Knight Legion class Crosshairs, so yeah, core class is way bigger when in comparison to these tiny figures that we saw for Transformers 5, and I am so glad that they kickstart core class off because, yeah, undeniably, these figures are way better in terms of engineering when in comparison to these little Legion figures. And then finally, here we have Big B stacked up alongside Small B, so the deluxe version alongside the core version. And as I said previously, despite this not being my favourite core class figure to date, in terms of the price point, in terms of the scale, I do think they've done a pretty good job in capturing the accuracy between the two designs, despite there being a massive difference in terms of size. And I also like the attention to detail of them capturing the kind of grey coloured rims that Dark the Moon B had, much like we're seeing here for the deluxe class version. So yeah, overall, not a bad looking vehicle at all. And so, wrapping up on this review for the Studio Series Core Class Bumblebee. As I said right at the very beginning of the video, at the time of this recording, this does stand as being the most pointless Studio Series figure, which I think has so far been released, because there's just not really a place in my collection, and I don't really think in anybody's collection for this guy to go, because at the moment we don't have any other Core Class Bayformer characters for this guy to be stacked up against, and it would be nice to maybe have some kind of indication that perhaps Hasbro will give us an Optimus Prime, an Ironhide, a Megatron in this scale. Again, it would really throw me back to some of those old Cyberverse Dark of the Moon days, and I wouldn't mind picking some of them up, but if this is the only Michael Bay core class figure that they plan to release in this size, then yeah, guys, I think you can definitely give this one a pass, especially if you already own the Studio Series version. But I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you guys think of this tiny little Bumblebee? And until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.